Call of Duty Ghosts was an interesting time for the series since its previous and still most popular predecessor, Black Ops 2, really left an outstanding high for players since they were not only excited to see what could come next in the series, but throughout the development it was Infinity Ward's time to shine since it was currently their year in the life cycle back in 2013, and it's still important to think about their take on the Call of Duty franchise with their Modern Warfare series, which was also given a ton of praise. But as we all know and have probably seen, Call of Duty Ghosts, when it came to their Extinction mode, it really wasn't all that bad, right? If you were to put all the zombie modes from Sledgehammer, Treyarch, Raven Software, Infinity Ward into a room as a family gathering, Extinction is the family failure. The black sheep in the family, which in my opinion is a real shame because this game mode really did some interesting things, and the story behind it all is not only a lot easier to follow than the mess that we have with Treyarch's main storyline, but it did some interesting things. But compared to what we're given now when it comes to the Call of Duty franchise, there was still so much love and creativeness behind this attempted mode. And the lead director behind it all was no other than Lee Ross himself, someone who I think is severely, totally underrated. Was Extinction really a tragic failure or secretly a diamond in the rough? I'll let you decide on that, and all opinions and comments are always appreciated. Even if you're able to like and subscribe, that'd be great. I always appreciate the support. So without further ado, let's see if Call of Duty Ghosts Extinction mode really deserved to go extinct, or if it deserved a second chance. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, when we first boot up a map, we need to choose our loadout. Whoa, Call of Duty was really ahead of themselves here with this one. This is where it started, where you could actually customize your loadout for a zombie type game mode, and the classes you can choose from are pretty generic, but it actually blends quite well. The engineering class will help repair the drill faster when it needs to get repaired, the tank class, which will supply more health and stronger melee damage the more you upgrade it for the player. Weapon specialist will help boost damage for your guns, and lastly the medic, which, you'll never guess what it does, will help revive your teammates faster while also granting faster mobility. You also have some other classes to choose from, but everyone should always be rocking the armor and the turret in my opinion, since they seem to be the most useful and something you'll always be throwing out for yourself and your teammates. When it comes to starting pistols, whatever you prefer will do just fine. I personally use the MP443. This pistol, because it's an automatic, has a fast reload, and just better accuracy is the reason why I choose it. If there is one thing Call of Duty does well when it comes to releasing a brand new game, is their launch maps. For the most part. An analogy I like to use for point of contact is like jumping into a warm bath. At first, it's really nice, refreshing, it helps you settle in quick. But after a while and the water starts to get a little bit cold, you kind of just sit there realizing, time's up, well, that was fun. A short and quick experience. And you also realize there really isn't much for you to do rather than just sit there. And unfortunately, that's how point of contact feels after a while. Also, just to get this out of the way, the movement, it's an absolute slogfest. I don't mean to be this slow in the game, that is just how Ghost's movement system is, and it's horrendous compared to what we have now. I feel like it's also just a little bit unfair to compare to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and 7 nowadays because of the crazy movement system we have, but it is so bad in Call of Duty Ghosts. But Point of Contact does a well-rounded job when it comes to segueing into this game mode, since things are totally different compared to the Zombies game mode we were used to. Right as we get into the game, we can see our team leaving us with this drill, which we need to destroy these hives with. Now these aliens that you're seeing, or these cryptids, which they're properly called, want to protect these hives. And this is where things can already get unbalanced and unfair at times, especially if you're playing in teams. Every time you start a hive, you're given challenges. If you're doing these challenges yourself, it's really not that bad, since if you fail, it just means that you're bad at doing that specific challenge, or maybe you're just bad at gaming. You get good. However, if you're trying to do these challenges while playing an online game with others, it literally becomes a nightmare at times. And there are also times where this could be just very detrimental to your run, since you can't upgrade your loadout. That's right, you can upgrade your equipment in real time, kind of like roguelikes if you think about it. Except in roguelikes, there are actually randomized maps like Binding of Isaac or Cult of the Lamb, and in Call of Duty Ghosts is just the same mission over and over. These challenges though are the stepping stone of a successful run, and for the most part can help other players to explore new options or strategies you may not have used before or just ignored. Like traps, something I feel like Zombies really struggles and ignores nowadays. Traps used to have so much personality and love behind them, and now recently I feel like, in my opinion, they're just kind of boring. Anyways, as we progress through the map, we can also interact with items to help you defeat cryptids, such as these white propane tanks you can see littered around everywhere. If you really want a side-by-side comparison for if it's actually worth to collect them and destroy the hive faster, well, here you go. At the end of each section within point of contact, there are these massive hives which act as checkpoints. Think of them as a placeholder, a protect stage, since an attack helicopter rolls in and you need to protect it from the scorpions, these alien-like creatures that shoot weird yellow goop. I do really like these sections because it's a test for that area, to see if you have what it takes, if you can defend yourself and just hold your ground. The players are also given a challenge to complete, and they aren't too difficult from anything else we've seen before. Kill aliens using this type of gun, kill aliens with traps, so on and so forth. But as we keep heading into another area, we get introduced to the Seekers, Hunters, and the very iconic Rhino cryptids. If you aren't prepared for the rhinos, they will take you down, but they really aren't too bad, and unfortunately, these are the last bit of enemies that we get introduced throughout the map, which is a real shame. The enemy variety feels a little bit lackluster for my liking, especially for a different game mode like Extinction. Having 5 different types of enemies within your first starting map really doesn't give a strong impression that there's too much to offer for when it comes to replayability. It definitely helps get players comfortable with this new game mode, but as you feel things out, it gets a little bit boring compared to other maps later on. I will say that point of contact definitely has a great flow and good challenge if you aren't prepared, which is a good thing because a map like point of contact should condition you as a player for harder challenges coming next. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the final section of this map. The final section is you and the players taking down this enormous hive. You have quite literally everything coming at you at once, and in my gameplay, it really doesn't do it justice for how chaotic things get when you have 4 players playing at the same time. The game literally becomes a clusterfuck when you have everyone playing. So always just take my gameplay with a grain of salt, since I don't have 3 other players to join me. But once you complete the hive, you need to detonate the nuke and sprint all the way back to spawn before the time expires. The first time you play this map and manage to get this far, it definitely feels like a rush. But after a couple times of completing it, you realize just how easy it is. And when you do it again and again, that feeling just dies even faster. Now for a launch map, I think it's a bit lackluster and boring because if they could have added just a little bit more that we see later on within the DLCs, it would have been fantastic. Launch maps are literally the stepping stone to get people to play your game. They want to see what's being offered, and if you can't bring much to the table, people are going to leave and leave fast to go play something else. It doesn't help that Call of Duty Ghosts was already getting a lot of hate for its boring campaign, enormous multiplayer maps, which was also just moving at a snail's pace. And then on top of the shit pile, a game mode with little to offer. And I don't want to be negative when I say that, but Call of Duty, even at this time, and still even is to this day, treats zombies as a side mode. And for a game mode like Extinction, it feels like a side mode to a side mode. It just felt like Infinity Ward and Raven Software gave Extinction just a little bit of love. But don't get me wrong, Lee Ross had some fantastic ideas. As I mentioned before, the aesthetic is really pleasing, the story isn't too complicated, but the fundamental gaming aspect when it comes to replayability is just a little bit lackluster. It felt like it was just half-baked. This is where the ball drops completely. And I'm not blaming Lee Ross for this, it's definitely just time crunching when it comes to development because Call of Duty is always moving on to better things apparently. But if they would have spent more time, especially with the replayability aspect and just adding a little bit more within the starting map, it would have made an entire difference. I think one of the issues as well with Extinction is the missions as well. They aren't just maps like zombies, and I don't mean to compare zombies so much, but these missions are so linear. You just go from start to end and that's it. There's no other way of playing it. And even then, and I know this last point is a bit of a stretch, but if you struggle to protect the drill in general, you aren't going to have fun with this game mode since there's no other way to play it. Although this is the beginning of the series with point of contact, I will say it is a breath of fresh air when comparing it side by side with zombies. This is really a unique experience in its own ways, and if you can manage to get through the sluggish movement and lack of objectives, maybe the next map will just do things a little bit better. The story of Extinction as well, since it is its own storyline we get introduced to, and for those who love crazy in-depth storytelling, I'm sorry, I'm not that guy, pal. I'm not that guy. I'm just gonna simplify things, and if you're super curious about the story of Extinction, here are some videos I found online. I'll leave it at the top of the description, so make sure to check it out. So during point of contact, people were sent and authorized by the President of the United States to exterminate these cryptids in hope that the nuclear explosion that we let off would clear out some of the mess, just so it wouldn't spread to other parts of the world, but as we can see, things didn't clearly work out that well. But as we continue from one mission to another, we get sent to the Nightfall facility, where a man named Archer was experimenting with the cryptids and somehow managed to create the Breeder, which is a great name to call something. I don't know, maybe I'm on the internet too much, but if you're calling something the Breeder, just get ready to see things when you look it up online. But with that being said, let's move on to Nightfall and see what that mission has to offer. Nightfall makes you feel like this, but in reality, it's gonna make you feel like this. Because this map is actually fantastic in so many ways. Just to get the new enemies out of the way, let's talk about the Phantoms, and I freaking love these guys because you can tell Call of Duty actually had a brain when they were making them. The behavior of the enemy is this hit and run tactic. It had so much personality behind it, and it wasn't like the Rhinos where it's going at you at full tilt, but he's trying to be strategic, popping in and out with this weird phantom dash. And this is something I personally want to see more when it comes to the Extinction game mode about these creatures. I know it seems like a small detail, but in retrospect, especially when it comes to these alien-like creatures or the cryptids, giving them personality, certain traits, makes people go wild because there's so much personality and even lore to why they do the things they do. How interesting would it be if you saw aliens walking alongside you as you're going through different areas? One of the most interesting things, in my opinion, is when you see a cryptid slowly go up to the drill, wondering, what the hell is this thing? It shows that they're curious as well, that they also have a brain of some sort, and it's just a shame that Call of Duty couldn't really commit to this aspect. It would have been so much better for the game mode. There is the breeder, and I'll talk more about this guy later on. One issue that I'm sure some people might find with Nightfall is that it's still following the same formula as Point of Contact. Get the drill, place it down to destroy the hive, and protect it from cryptids. But if you explore around the map, you can find these trash bags or ammo boxes laying around, and this was something that Point of Contact did have, which can provide attachments for your guns, give you ammo, specialist equipment. But in Nightfall, they added locker keys. These are more rare to obtain, but if you manage to get one, you can unlock a fully kitted out gun from these lockers. And it's a fantastic detail since it provides a bit of extra damage and strategy, since you'll have more ammo in your guns and also just a fully kitted out gun. It doesn't get much better than that. Also, just to point this out there, if you collect enough teeth, you can unlock this specific relic, which, when you turn it on, it has a better chance to find these items. In my mind, with just adding the locker key in the mix of items you can find is like adding some butter in your plain noodles. It can only get so good. It just can't get any better than that. Which is a real shame because they are a fantastic item, but you have a better chance of just restarting your game and looking through the first area again if you can't manage to find one. There's so many things to search throughout the first area, so if you just get unlucky, just keep on restarting. It'll help you progress and fight the cryptids faster, especially if you are struggling, so it's just the way to go. But let's talk about the map for a second before we carry on too far into Nightfall. For some reason, this map has something going for it, and I really just can't place my finger on it. Lee Ross really has a talent to understand aesthetics in creating maps and just being able to immerse people in an experience. And also, if you haven't watched my documentary on Infinite Warfare where I talk about all the maps in great detail, I really recommend that since it's a fine example of people missing out on a truly amazing experience. Nightfall embraces the cold setting and it does it quite well. I think it does it better than Point of Contact in a lot of ways due to A, having a boss to look forward to, B, having more enemy variety, since in my opinion Point of Contact did feel a little bit lackluster in that area, and C, having a better reason to switch up your loadout, weapons, and actually grind for teeth if you want to experience other options for gameplay. Nightfall as a whole, especially with these aspects combined, is a better, more well-rounded experience than Point of Contact. I know that can sound contradictory because earlier I did say Point of Contact is a good experience, especially as a segue into the game mode, but Nightfall just has that enemy variety and shake up in gameplay. Something as well within Nightfall that Point of Contact can't do is if you just don't prepare yourself that well, Nightfall will kick your ass within the later areas. But each area comes with its own pros and cons depending on your playstyle. If you like open areas like the beginning area within Nightfall, where you can stray away, explore without having to worry about getting surrounded, then the first area is just for you. But if you enjoy clutter, chaos, and just micromanaging, the final area is a blast since it gets way too crazy and overwhelming if you aren't playing at your best. Even as we continue on throughout Nightfall, there's one other major thing that I have an issue with this mission, and that's the boss fight. The boss fight in Nightfall is really underwhelming. If you just have a good gun, good aim, and decent equipment, you can beat this thing in 3 minutes. I do understand the area is really big since you could hypothetically have a lot of players running around, but the boss fight area, in my opinion, is just too big. It doesn't help that in this massive area, the boss barely moves around. I think it would just make it more fun and challenging if the boss actually moved a little bit, but not only that, use the environment to its advantage. For example, when you complete the first phase of the boss fight, you can see the boss retreating and going on this roof. Why couldn't this just be a phase where we have to fight the boss from up here? It's just an idea, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Imagine if you were fighting Nikolai in this giant mech suit and all he did was stand there, move side to side for a little bit, and that was it. It would feel so bland, boring, and also just too easy. And that's just how this boss fight feels. Even after so many years later, it just feels too easy. He does have moves that are quite threatening, like this gun that he can shoot from his back. He can shoot eggs, which actual spawn aliens. With all that being said, Nightfall just feels like a better, more implemented point of contact. At this point in the story as well, the map just feels better and more polished, which is really strange if you think about it, since point of contact is the starting map. This is what's supposed to give that wow factor, that feeling of excitement for what's to come next. So why does it feel like Lee Ross and his team flopped there, but directed something so much better here? Maybe I'm thinking too much into this because point of contact didn't really have a true boss fight. It just felt a bit underwhelming in that aspect. But for what DLC 1 had to provide for the players, it feels pretty strong. You can shake up the gameplay a bit when it comes to your starting kit, find fully kitted guns if you get a locker key, and just the flow of the map also, in my opinion, feels a little bit better since there's more to actually do within each area. It doesn't feel like it's moving too fast like point of contact. But I don't know, you could give or take because that's just opinion at the end of the day. I feel like Nightfall just stands a little bit better when it comes to flow. There's more things to see, more things to interact with, or I guess search for, since there's just ammo crates littered everywhere throughout each area. But with that being said, let's move on to Mayday, the most popular DLC map within the Extinction game mode, and it really does set a high note for just how crazy the game can actually get. Now this is where things get really messed up within the shitstorm of Extinction, so just hear me out for a second. We started with a bland, boring, and personally way too simple of a starting map, which was point of contact, to something more polished, well-rounded, difficult, replayable map with an actual boss fight, which was Nightfall. Now we're peaking at an even more polished map with more enemies, replayability aspects like crafting equipment, and an even better boss fight where we fight a literal fucking kraken on a military ship. Mayday was on a completely different level. My only criticism I'll say right now is that the map isn't too pleasant looking at compared to point of contact and Nightfall. We are stuck inside of a military ship. You can only make it look so good, I guess. But Lee Ross and his team put all their brains together, crafted an experience which is still top 5 in my opinion, even compared to other zombie maps. So let's dive deep into Mayday and see what it has to offer. Mayday introduced the crafting system, which is a total game changer for one reason: getting the Venom. Now, the Venom was introduced in Nightfall, and I pushed it off here for a reason because that was just a regular variant we could access within Nightfall. Now we have 4 different types of Venoms we can create, but it's RNG for which one you get during your run. There is a lightning, fire, cedar, and a regular Venom variant, and the cedar is the worst one. You don't even need to pull up statistics. If you watch gameplay of it, you can just see how terrible it is and inefficient it is compared to just the other variants. I also don't know the statistics from the lightning, fire, and the regular Venom, so if anyone does know that, if there really is a substantial difference, let me know in the comments. There was this new enemy which they added called the Cedar, and this guy is a complete nuisance, but it actually fits quite well in this map. It really focuses on you being aware of this guy, or else he's going to create a bunch of these projectile pods that can shoot you, and they just deal a ton of damage. It forces a player to really prioritize crowd control in their surroundings. I usually have a gripe with these type of enemies because there's a lot of times where it doesn't get implemented so well. But for a map like Mayday, where we also have the Phantoms, Rhinos, Seekers, which you'll definitely need to prioritize your focus on since they deal a ton of damage, the Cedars are a nice welcome blend. On top of that, Mayday also has the same formula as Nightfall and point of contact when it comes to the drill, although we can get into small side areas where we can access toolkits to collect parts if you wish to craft some items. This does allow you to access the equipment easier and faster, so getting in there doesn't really hurt since it also doesn't take a long time to open up the door, or doors if you're getting into multiple areas. One thing that Mayday does is it cranks up the difficulty extremely fast compared to Nightfall and point of contact. Once you reach the second area, which is the cargo bay, you can get completely overrun by the cryptids, and on solo, it's a nightmare. The only reason why it's a nightmare is because when the cryptids hit you, your character stutters, which is an actual mechanic they developed called flinching. Your character flinches when you get hit, which also makes it easier to get hit again from the cryptids. It's hard to see this in my gameplay because I have a specific relic or mod equipped. I still feel like even with this equipped, they can still hit me back to back, but I don't know, maybe that's just me. In my opinion as well, Mayday is just able to create a more immersive experience compared to the previous maps. When it came to Nightfall, I felt like the most immersed you could get is near the end, when things just get absolutely chaotic within the facility, you have to multi-manage. Mayday is like that from start to end. It feels like there is just so much you need to focus on that you can't really let your mind slip away. You need to be on your A game at all times, which is fantastic. Even as we progress a little bit through the beginning of the area, we have this giant tentacle we need to fight. Call it a mid-boss fight. It isn't too hard, but if you're unable to do crowd control well, it's just a small taste of what's going to be coming at in the near future for you. One thing that Mayday also does when it comes to shaking up the gameplay is in the middle of the cargo bay, we have this hive we need to get, but we can't access it ourselves. We have to place place the drill on top of a cart. And from that, we need to protect the drill from a distance, and the crazy thing is, it really works. It's actually a really fun section, and I'm sad that they just do this concept once. We literally never see this again, even in the future maps. But after we're done with the middle of the cargo bay, we make our way to the top of the ship, and this is where things get extremely hectic. As if it wasn't hectic before, they managed to crank up the difficulty yet again. This is also where I should mention that completing your challenges to level up your equipment and support items is so important, can be a bit troubling if you can't get there. Hopefully within my gameplay footage you can see me completing challenges and upgrading my equipment, and just how vital it really is. I find that the most difficult challenges we have to complete within these maps are when you need to kill the marked enemies first before anything else. And in Mayday, it's particularly challenging since they throw literally everything at you. That's the only challenge I really have a gripe with, because it can break the flow and honestly ruin your run if you can't make the comeback. It's just not worth it to break your entire run, which has probably been around 30 or 40 minutes at this point. It's just a single challenge point anyways, and we still get a challenge point after completing each hive. Once you make your way to the second final area and destroy the hives there, we are given this protecting phase, where we need to protect these 4 gas tubes, which we are trying to use to kill Samantha Cross. Oh yeah, by the way, in our story, this character named Sam, or Samantha Cross, who we found during the Nightfall project, has the capabilities of being able to read any language or learn languages at an extremely fast pace. She even has the ability to decode the cryptids language, while also somehow being able to possess the power to control them. But this part of Mayday where we need to protect these gas tubes can get a little bit crazy. I know within my solo gameplay it really doesn't do it justice, but when you have other people playing with you, it gets quite crazy. After a couple minutes, you'll hear Samantha scream, and then comes the best experience we've seen in Extinction yet. The Kraken. This boss fight really is a work of art. It's amazing how the boss fights get better and better in Extinction, and with the Kraken boss fight, it really forces you to be at your best since it's easy to make mistakes, and that's it. Restart, try again. This boss fight has multiple phases, if you want to call it that, but it usually goes in a specific order like this. Once the boss fight starts, there are going to be aliens spawning around you that you need to be aware of. Then after a couple minutes, the Kraken will slam down his tentacles, which is pretty easy to avoid, but after a while, he'll place his tentacles down, which will heat up the entire floor, but the middle area. And if you don't know this, it's probably too late since it does such an insane amount of damage, especially if you don't have armor equipped or a medic on your team. I believe you can shoot his tentacles to get him off the ship faster, but I usually just wait after a couple minutes, and after a while his head will begin to glow, and this is where you need to light him up with your guns and weapons, or you can use the turrets that the boss fight arena offers you. One of the common mistakes that I see happen in Mayday all the time is when people get too cocky and just stand there on the turret, and the cryptids can still hit you since your player model just stands there. So if you aren't good at multitasking, you're gonna go down. The Kraken also has this final attack, which is really detrimental if you get hit by it, and that's the Sonic Boom. It takes down all your equipment, and as I said before, it just does massive damage. A way to avoid this is just by hiding behind the crate, which isn't too bad, but you just need to be aware when he's getting ready to do that move. It's pretty easy telegraph, but after he does this, he'll go underwater and end up on the other side, and you just rinse and repeat this process multiple times. And after a while, once you're able to do this a couple times and you defeat the Kraken, then that's it. You completed Mayday. For a map that isn't visually pleasing and immersive as the others, Mayday managed to really feel like a peak experience for the Extinction game mode somehow. And that's the other thing that makes this whole era with COD Ghost so interesting, is that usually within Call of Duty, the DLC 1 maps are what really drives players to keep on going and see what the developers had cooking in the oven. But in Call of Duty Ghost, they had 2 fantastic back-to-back experiences ready to deliver for the players. It's just a shame that after this point, it goes downhill from here, and I mean, it goes downhill hard. Mayday, even in my heart, will be the best experience when it comes to the Extinction game mode. And playing it online was fun at the time, and playing with my friends in person was fun as well. It was just that perfect blend of challenging and casualness to it. And that was the other thing with Extinction that I feel like Zombies still has a tough time pulling off. How do you create a game mode like Zombies and hope to keep it not too challenging for players, but not too easy and boring? Extinction was just able to find that perfect balance, but at the cost of other things we can help to compare, which is movement, replayability, and just lack of customization when it came to weapons, limited perks to choose from. But with that being said, let's talk about Awakening and see what that mission has to offer. Awakening is beautiful. I mean, it's really beautiful. It's a fantastic experience. It's insane how far we've circled around when it comes to the dark and gloomy red aesthetic Point of Contact had to offer, to being stuck inside a boring military ship, which did manage to have the best gameplay experience out of all the missions, but then coming back to a map that completely immerses you into the true environment and nest of the cryptids. But its greatest downfall is it struggles to keep the players engaged in this dreadfully long experience. Let's get the new enemies out of the way. The gargoyles are one of, if not the worst enemies to deal with. They're usually flying from a distance away and can shoot their needles at the players, which does pretty insane damage if you don't find cover. They can also run on the ground and attack you, and that's just a rare case unless you're in a cave where they can't hit you when they're flying around. I feel like they don't really mesh well when it comes to the gameplay. This also goes along with the dive bombers, and they're best described as their name. They dive bomb at the players, and they're a serious pain in the ass to hit out of the air due to their tiny hitboxes. You'll always know they're coming at you since your in-game character is always freaking out over them, but sometimes you can just struggle to pin your focus on them since they blend in too well with the background of the map. And then the final enemy within Awakening is the mammoths, which are a reskin of the rhinos. They typically move a little bit slower and have a larger health pool, and they have this really cool attack where they can spawn hunters with their slam move, but you won't encounter these guys unless you go off into a side area where there's lockers and hidden items. So just be careful if you wander off from the main mission. Something that Awakening does right is introduce the arc attachment, which you can add to any gun. This blue attachment does massive damage, and it's honestly a must-have. Now, some of you might be confused when you watch my gameplay since I already have this on my beginning pistol at the start of most maps, but that's just because I have a relic or mod enabled, which I was able to select on or off since I collected enough teeth to unlock it. Teeth are also something I'll mention later on, so just stay tuned. Pro tip for Awakening: if you don't want to have a miserable time, add this blue barrel to the chainsaw, which you can buy in the starting area after you collect 2,000 points. It's honestly just the best way to experience this map without having to struggle. Also, one thing I just want to add, how did it take this long for the developers and in-game designers to create a map this visually appealing? I feel like this is what most people have been looking for the entire time when playing Extinction. Everything just fits right. Point of Contact was almost there in my opinion, but this place being held deep inside a cave and you got these valleys and drop-offs and a giant pyramid to discover makes you want to dive in even further. But there's one thing that Awakening just missed with, which completely ruins the experience, and that's the gameplay loop. So like before when it came to destroying hives with the drill, we now need to scan these pillars so we can decrypt the alien's language, and after we complete all the pillars within that area, we need to destroy them with this drone we can use. But this drone can be destroyed in 3 to 4 hits from the cryptids, and for this tiny drone, apparently it has the biggest hitbox in the world, so good luck with dodging anything since it's also so clunky and oddly placed compared to everything else we've seen before. I don't know, do we really need to destroy these pillars? This map's mission as well is the longest out of them all, which is at least over an hour. And I know that might not sound that bad, but if you die, you gotta restart and do the same thing over and over again. It drags out. And the issue is that we're repeating the same concept for every area in this mission until we reach the finale. I'm not even joking. It really is a shame because you think for a map as visually appealing as Awakening, you think Raven Software and Infinity Ward would pull out the big guns, getting you ready for the most mind-bending, craziest experience yet. But nope, there's nothing there. There's not even a boss fight in this map. It's a timed defend the objective phase at the end of the map. And apparently they loved what they did with Point of Contact, having to make the players run back to the beginning of the map. So we do it again in Awakening. It's just so disappointing. Because honestly, and I hate to compare it to the previous map, but how do you go from having this giant raging kraken trying to take down this enormous military ship to nothing? It's so sad. It's a shame because there really isn't anything else to talk about within Awakening. There's some new enemies, some different attachments, and that's it. No boss fight, mid-level boss fight. Even when I look online about how the development happened within each of the missions, or just some insider thoughts, I only found this IGN video of some developers talking, but the gameplay audio is too freaking loud to hear what they're actually saying.
So Unfabulous Gamer asks, how long did it take to make Extinction, and how much of an effort was like put into it? Was it like a good chunk of the team? Like, I mean, so obviously there's a cross team effort between Infinity Ward. Julian, you're on the Infinity Ward side,
Besides that, it just gets worse and worse from here. The story is still mid at best, since we're trying to stop Samantha and just figure out why the aliens are following her every order, but the last map is literally the bottom of the shit bucket. One thing you probably noticed as well is that as we keep going through each different map, the sections of the videos are getting shorter and shorter, and that's because Extinction just isn't bringing much to the table. And I'd love to keep talking about each map, but they're not implementing anything new for me to talk about, so there's nothing else to say. But with that being said, there's really no other thoughts I have when it comes to Awakening. It's a boring experience. Yeah, there's the zero gravity concept that we can use, and also shake up the gameplay a bit, I guess. But the only good thing I have to say about this map is that it's just aesthetically pleasing, and you can only look at things so long before you go, well, that was cool, what's next? And for what's coming up next is just sad. In my opinion, Exodus can be described in 3 words: bland, boring, and uninspiring. It takes place inside of a city and does create this choose your own path aspect, which, take it as you want, is an interesting take to finally diverse the linear aspect of the previous missions we were offered, but it still feels the same nonetheless. And instead of scanning pillars, we are now powering on generators, since we need to launch this nuke to destroy the aliens and hopefully just get rid of them once and for all. One thing I do like about this map is the wonder weapon, which is the NX-1 disruptor, something that you can build. So I guess it's more of a craftable item than a wonder weapon, but just using the term wonder weapon makes it easier to identify it as. This weapon is great though. It does a lot of damage and it's a must-have, especially when you're fighting against the ancestors. That's right, we have one final enemy to face off against, and that's the ancestors. And to be honest, these guys really have a cool history. They are the smartest out of the entire species and can control aliens themselves. They also have the capability of having their own conscience, being able to read, and as you can probably see in the gameplay, they float. It's really a shame that for the final DLC of Extinction, it's so underwhelming. It's boring, it doesn't add much to shake up the gameplay besides just throwing us a curveball, which I'm stating lightly in quotes since it doesn't change much, but give us different paths to follow. Although it's no surprise since most Call of Duty's DLC 4s are pretty miserable, since the COD team is already moving on to the next game for their primary focus, and we've seen this with Revelations, the Frozen Dawn, Beast from Beyond, which hey, Beast from Beyond had the cryptids implemented, but they did it a whole lot better. It's a shame that Exodus just struggles to diverse its own mission from the rest because it just feels the same. Fighting against the ancestors is a nice break from everything else, but when you just sit there and look at it, it's just a big pile of mush, and just having all the enemies being thrown at you at once isn't too much from what we just saw before. Something that also makes it even sadder when you compare Exodus to everything else is every other mission at least had a ton of personality behind it. We had a town with a breakout infestation, we were caught up in the cold and then brought into this laboratory, we were stuck in the middle of the ocean in this military ship, then we got sent to this beautiful underground cave where these creatures were living and thriving, and then here we are in this bland, boring city. I understand this rapture aesthetic it's going for, but in all honesty, with all the grays and browns, it just feels so boring. Like, why couldn't they just have a room completely infested and engroved in the hives and pods to give that awakening feeling? To really emphasize and hyperbolize how bad really things are for us, how deep the world is within the cryptid infestation. It would have added a more immersive experience to the gameplay. One thing I will say when it comes to Exodus is the difficulty is absolutely insane, which is crazy because I feel like after Nightfall, it was just maxed out difficulty, but Exodus just cranks it up to 20. Every time I load up Exodus, I have to put the difficulty onto easy. I kept on going down, taking so much damage, and even as I just try and upgrade all of my equipment, I would still get down and have to restart. So I will say it is the most difficult experience out of all of the maps, in my opinion at least, but it still struggles to diverse itself and give its own personality compared to everything else. It's just so bland, so boring, and I don't have a lot of good things to say about it. One of the things Extinction doesn't do well is its weapon variety. The gunplay gets really stale fast, and for only having 4 or 5 weapons to choose from every time we play our game, the only time where things get really spiced up is just gambling and seeing what we get from the lockers with a fully kitted gun. But even then, if you don't like what you got, you might as well just restart or wait until you can buy the chainsaw off the wall. One of my other biggest issues is just how little teeth you get per run. Now, teeth is this currency you can spend within Extinction to unlock extra perks or benefits for your character for your runs, such as using the hypno knife against the rhino so it's on your side, having cryptid ammo, which is a mesh of every ammo variant you can select all put into one. But during each game, you can collect only about 10 to 20 teeth if you're lucky. And I'm saying that while rocking 4 to 5 relics, which also makes my game harder. Relics are something you can enable in your games, which makes it more challenging, but you earn extra XP and get a higher score during your game, while also having a better chance to earn teeth since it increases your bonus teeth when you complete a mission. You also unlock relics after you prestige, and I think you can prestige 10 times since there's 10 relics, so if you have all the relics on, you'll get the max score, but it's literally impossible to beat the game if you have 10 relics. Or I think there was one person that did it, which is just insane. Let's say hypothetically you did want to unlock the cryptid ammo, which is 500 teeth. Well, if you are able to hypothetically complete point of contact in 30 minutes, and during your run you get 10 teeth per run, in 1 hour you get 20 teeth, meaning it would take 25 hours to unlock enough teeth just for the cryptid ammo alone. And that's being generous if you manage to get that amount of teeth per run in point of contact and having a smooth run with your alien spawns. But just imagine how miserable that experience is. Extinction doesn't shake up the gameplay, it's just linear missions, so you complete point of contact over and over and over again. You're seeing the same thing, experiencing the same gameplay over again. It's miserable. You get so brain numb to it. It becomes a complete slog fest. At least when you're playing zombies and you're trying to do a round 100 challenge, you can go to different areas, try out different methods. There's always something different you can try depending on the game. So you can still manage to keep it fresh while not getting too boring and just brain dead. With Extinction, there's just no room for that. There's no room whatsoever. You start here, you end here, and that's it. For some people, I'm sure this is fine, but as I said, if you want to unlock things for your character, it's gonna get so boring. You're gonna end up at a point where once you unlock it, you're probably not even going to want to use it. You're going to want to delete Extinction and just never touch it again. I say that as a joke, but I can't imagine unlocking the second class mod and actually using that in a run, because I'm already so sick of Extinction. You have to get 1,000 teeth for that. That's insane. Something as well I want to mention is that just the lack of interactable objects or side Easter eggs we can do between each and every map. I know this can be a little bit far-fetched and just me comparing it to zombies, but something that was so satisfying in zombies was managing to somehow find something on the map you can interact with and wondering what it was actually meant for. I think a good example of this is the plant in Der Eisendrache. If you picked up this plant by accident or just by chance, you'd have no idea what the point of it was, but you come to discover that you just need to go back in time, place it down, and then voila, it's a fully grown plant and you can get a free gobblegum. In Extinction, for point of contact, how cool would it have been to be able to interact or set up traps with vehicles around the map, or be able to explore more buildings and see what people left behind? In Nightfall, how fun would it be to explore more parts of the laboratory, being able to interact with buttons for possible side Easter eggs or collect chemical parts? You get the idea. More things equals more fun, more possibility for replayability. My biggest and final issue with this game mode, and you can make fun of me here, is that there's no survival mode. This would have been perfect for a game mode like this. I mean, Advanced Warfare did it twice, and Sledgehammer wasn't complaining, so why did Lee Ross not push for this idea and come up with a crappy arcade mode? What you're watching right now is this arcade mode where you just kill cryptids and it keeps this timer going, but it's so bad and really inconsistent in my opinion. It's a serious letdown, and just playing it is quite miserable. It doesn't provide you anything and you can't unlock anything extra. There's really just no point in playing this. It doesn't give you a different experience other than the missions that we were playing before. One of the biggest replayability aspects in Call of Duty Zombies is the survival aspect. Something to note, and not to sound like a complete nerd, but only about 10% of players, not even 10% of players, actually complete any Easter eggs within a zombies map. People just play the game for the experience and see how long they can last. So having that as a featured mode would have been perfect instead of pissing off online players because you decided to be a lunatic and miss every bullet instead of focusing or keeping your accuracy above 75% and possibly ruining someone else's run. It would have been just such a nice shakeup in gameplay. It would have been able to try different things, invent other possibilities for future games, but it wasn't able to do that, and we'll never get something like this again. Now, I don't want to end things off on a sour note. I think there's two very important questions that need to be asked. Does this game mode stand on its own, and should it return in a future title? To answer the first question, it's a no. I don't think Extinction as a game mode is able to stand on its own, and sadly, it's because of a bunch of things I already spoke about in this video when it comes to lack of guns, bad movement, low enemy variety, too linear. Funny enough, I think Beast from Beyond does a damn better job with the cryptids than Extinction even does. I know this is just my opinion, but the game feels smoother and better when you kill the scouts, hunters, phantoms, rhinos, and maybe I'm saying this because it's a different and better engine compared to what we see in Ghosts. But can you really blame me for thinking this, because there's an actual gameplay loop, different things to try out. I actually have a lot of gun variety. To answer the second question for should Extinction return in a future title, I don't know. If COD was talking and it actually had something in the works, then sure. Just make sure to actually have some variety with certain aspects, and I'm all for it. Just don't make it live service, because I hate Call of Duty live service games or the direction they're going out with now. In all honesty, if they were to create something again, they have a foundation to work off of and make it even better, to give a better, well-rounded experience. Nightfall and Mayday should definitely be the focal points when it comes to having a good experience made better. Call of Duty has all the tools in their hands, and as long as there's a proper director to be able to push these concepts out into fruition, I think they can make something decent at least. I don't want to say something amazing because Extinction isn't amazing. To be honest, it's just mid, and that's me being generous, and that's someone as well who loves to branch out and try something different rather than Treyarch zombies and just the most popular experience people are usually playing. I played hours of Extinction and it's just not there. There's a lot of things missing, unfortunately. It's just not up there with the other titans. I feel like throughout this video I've been very negative towards Extinction, and I don't really want to come across that way because I do genuinely like this game mode. It's just unfortunate that it has a lot of flaws inside of it. So I think it's important that I also speak about the things I genuinely think that this game mode did quite well in, and for the fact that Call of Duty was brave enough to experiment and try something different with it, which is always appreciated. I will say one of the things I most like about Extinction is being able to find equipment, and especially the locker keys. The locker keys especially is just this great shakeup with the gameplay. It adds so much replayability, because if you find a fully kitted gun like the chainsaw, which is obviously the best weapon, I feel like that is kind of a bad comparison, but if you were to find the chainsaw, it's exciting. You're just ecstatic. It's the best weapon. You want to use that. It's faster to reload with, has way more ammo. Even just other SMGs or assault rifles are great when they're fully kitted out. I really like the locker keys because it adds a lot more fun value. Same with the Venom variants. I wish this was added in Nightfall as well. The fact that we can get different variants of the Venom, I like the visual effects that they have. It's just really interesting. They're very powerful wonder weapons, and it's a great get off me option, which is always nice to have. And that's the thing that Extinction does quite well with when it comes to the actual gameplay, is that there's no options to just have everything eliminated all at once. One thing that Extinction also does very well when it comes to the gameplay, especially when it comes to the PvE, is that you're never too overpowered. You always have to play strategically if you're lacking in some areas when it comes to crowd control, just main defense, repairing the drill, and this comes with either solo play or if you're playing co-op. Even in Point of Contact, which I know is the easiest map out of the bunch, you still need to be strategic in some sort of way or else you will get overrun, and that's nice. Within zombies, it feels like a certain point in the game, your brain just kind of turns off. It gets too easy. Depending on the map, obviously, it leaves a lot to be desired, and Extinction brings that to the table because there's never really anything to just instantly help you. You have to work your way towards it, even if you're in a predicament where you're near the end of your run. And overall, the aesthetic and just how everything is progressing as the world gets more decayed and overrun by these cryptids is really fascinating. You can see the story progress through these missions. Obviously, in a map like Mayday, it's kind of hard to tell because we're stuck inside a ship, but when you go into Awakening, it is absolutely mesmerizing. I wish zombie maps looked this good at times, being able to really bask in the aesthetic, the theme that it's trying to go for. If we're going through the maps one by one, especially when it comes to the aesthetics and just scenery and atmosphere, Point of Contact is great for just setting the standard. It is beautiful. You can see that there's a lot going on, and it does a fantastic job with being able to immerse the players within this decaying world. As I said, my only issue with Point of Contact is just the lack of enemies. That would have really set in stone this place that's being overrun by cryptids if we just had a little bit more enemy variety. Nightfall's cold aesthetic was just beautiful, fantastic. The thing I also really liked about it is just how foggy it is, or I guess windy because it's a snowstorm. You got that extra little bit of fog and you can't really see much into the distance. It just creates that nice visual effect. It's like a horror movie. I feel like it just does that really nice. Even when we get to the later areas inside the laboratory, it just flows really smoothly. And I feel like nowadays it's hard for the developers to pull that off without making such substantial jumps to go from one area to another, and the aesthetic or theme just completely switches and it feels really off and unbalanced, where Nightfall was able to perfectly encapsulate that because we're actually inside a facility. Things make sense. There's logic behind it. I don't know. I feel like also within the zombie storyline, they can just throw anything at us and people are just okay with it. And for the longest time, that's kind of bothered me. When it comes to Mayday's aesthetics, I've said this before, you can only make it look so good because we're just stuck inside this military ship. I don't really have an issue with it, but if they really want to, if the developers really wanted to go above and beyond, they could have added more hives inside the ship, or just more of the red dark tangent gooiness that we've seen before, or these pods, the hives. It would have just added a little bit more flavor, personality, and just, hey, we're really getting overrun even in the middle of an ocean, just to set in that feeling, that tone. Awakening, I literally just have no words. It did it perfectly and there's nothing else I would change. The only thing I would change within Awakening is the actual gameplay loop and just the ending of Awakening. It was just boring, little bit lackluster, but literally just one of the most gorgeous maps out there from back then to even to this day. And Exodus, just switch it up with the grays and browns. Add more of that red aesthetic that Point of Contact had, that Awakening had. It would have made Exodus look perfect, because for the last mission where humanity is on its point of extinction, it would have really just set in that factor. It really would have just set in stone that the cryptids have been able to take over everything and there's nothing we can do. I really just like the aesthetic of the hives and that red-blue kind of color scheme, or red and gray. Another thing that I forgot to mention about was the mods that we can attach, and these are great, but my issue with them is that it takes a long time to grind for teeth, whether solo or online. I can't imagine how treacherous it was to grind teeth online with other players unless you were playing with a friend, but even then it would have been absolutely brutal just to find the time where it works out for both of you, because later on when you're trying to get some of the better upgrades such as cryptid ammo or being able to use two classes at once, it takes 1500 teeth to unlock both, and as I said, it takes about 25 hours straight just to unlock the cryptid variant, and that's playing Point of Contact back to back to back to back, assuming you're playing Point of Contact since it is the shortest map to complete. For a game mode such as Extinction, which really isn't talked about nowadays, I thought it was important to also listen and hear what the community had to say. First up, and coming from my Discord server, the Angry Goose, which is at the top of the description or comments, comes from Overlord Mog. Overall, I think Extinction was very good, although I think there are many ways they could have improved, and just to name a few, why was the Venom X not included in the last two maps? Optional side rooms should have been featured in the last two maps. A bit more of a random element, as aside from a quest you got and a small bit of hive spawn for Point of Contact, everything ran the exact same. I think what this means is the replayability going from one map to another was pretty much the exact same, but if I'm wrong, just let me know. Do we really need two different types of enemies that just move straight to you and explode, the Seeker and Bomber? I didn't even really think about this. I guess that is, I guess they pretty much are the same within that aspect. I didn't really care about Cross and Archer in the slightest. I think the story shouldn't have been focused around humans fighting each other. I didn't like the ancestors and think they should have been given more proper cryptid bosses instead of them. I think if they were able to pull off two other bosses instead of the ending we get in Awakening and also just the timed defense that we get in Exodus, it would have been fantastic. Now coming over to my YouTube channel, I created two community posts. The first one is Extinction a good Call of Duty game mode? And out of 80 people that voted, 66 voted yes. And these are also some of the comments within that community post. First one coming from Rambo Mode, who had to say, at least they had the balls to try something different with a side mode, which I totally agree with. It's always nice when Call of Duty makes a change and will commit to something different, to try out something different, and you just don't see that nowadays. Rex Zombies Brazil said, I love it. Just wish they had some sort of survival mode instead of chaos for some variety over the default mission experience. Which, funny enough, actually segues into the next community post. Could Extinction benefit with a survival mode added to it? And out of 67 votes, the majority of people, 81%, voted yes. I think this is really interesting, and I totally agree that a game mode like Extinction would have benefited from this. It's still sticking with something familiar like zombies by having a survival mode, but still branching out into something different to give a new experience. It's unfortunate because it felt like within the first couple maps there was just some of these half-baked ideas. Then you can see within the next map iteration, you can see it fully highlighted and put into fruition. The Venom X is a prime example how it was created in Nightfall, but in Mayday you have 4 different variants to try. I'm sure I mentioned this before, but why not just have all 4 variants within Nightfall? When it comes to the locker keys, why not have that also in point of contact to give it more replayability value? Personally, I think locker keys would have been really nice with in point of contact as well, and I know some people might think that would be really kind of off balance, especially due to the map being easier than the others, but it still would have introduced that factor and what is actually available within the game mode, and possibly keep people interested to try the other DLC maps. With all that being said, I just wanted to say thank you guys for watching. If you made it this far, I really would appreciate if you liked and subscribe. Any support helps. I had a lot of fun this year making Halloween videos, and this is the final Halloween project. And with that being said, I'm going to take a nap. Goodbye.